Hi everyone, thank you for joining me. I am Carrie Carter, the Assistant Director of the Margaret H. Ordubadian University Writing Center at Middle Tennessee State University. In this video, I will be sharing some ways you can support student writers through feedback. We want to think about what would best help the student writer and consider where they are in the writing process, what type of process they're engaging in, and what they are looking for in your feedback. Think back to a time when you received feedback from a professor, a tutor, or someone else. This could be a positive experience or a negative experience. Specifically, what type of feedback did you receive, and how did it help you or not help you? Pause the video here to write, think, and discuss. Reflecting on what has worked or what hasn't worked for us helps us identify feedback strategies that work for students. General aspects include prioritizing your feedback, being as clear as possible, and not being afraid to talk about writing. Prioritizing your feedback means to consider it within the framework of higher order concerns and lower order concerns, or what we call HOCS and LOCS. HOCS address the larger, more holistic concerns, including but not limited to the thesis, evidence, sources, organization, and adherence to the assignment sheet. We prioritize these things over LOCS, which address more local concerns, including sentence structure, grammar, and word choice. Why? Because as a writer addresses HOCS, original errors might be deleted and new ones might be made, so it's much more efficient to address the LOCS last. Also, focusing on LOCS first reinforces this idea for students that the only thing that matters is grammar. While grammar is important, students might tend to focus heavily on grammar and ignore, for example, a flimsy thesis or poor sources. You may want to consider some specific strategies when addressing higher order concerns with students. The first way to help students address higher order concerns is to discuss the assignment with the writer. Ensure that the writer understands what the assignment aims to accomplish, and if any writing completed adheres to expectations. If the assignment asks the writer to provide an analysis, for example, but the student has only summarized, you now have a clear priority. After discussing the assignment together, talk with the writer about their ideas. Ask questions. Listen to their excitement or frustrations. Hear what they want their paper or writing project to say. This will help you offer suggestions after or as you read. This brings us to another important stage of addressing HOCS. Reading the draft out loud. Ask the writer if you can read through the draft out loud together and encourage the writer to follow along with you. This will let you stop and ask questions about important parts of the writing, such as, is this your thesis? Organization can also be tricky for students. Another strategy is to help the students see how their ideas work together. The Writing Center's Visual Organizer handout can help students build outlines before drafting, or can be used to group and rearrange and organize ideas after. You may also want to build a backward outline. Show the student how they have currently arranged their ideas using keywords and phrases, and offer suggestions on other ways in which their ideas can be arranged. Questioning is one of the best strategies you can use while working on higher order concerns. Even stopping to ask, "What do you mean here?" can help a writer flesh out ideas. In a writing feedback session, don't be afraid to write as the student talks. Sometimes students are surprised to see they have had so many good ideas that they hadn't made clear yet on the page. Lower order concerns require some different tactics to help students. All writers have what we call patterns of error. These are tendencies in our writing to repeat the same kind of structure or mistake. For example, if I tend to write comma splices, I most likely won't have this error just once. I will probably repeat the comma splice several times in my writing, even on the same page. As you read the paper with the student, identify these patterns. Remember, you don't have to point out all the comma splices in the whole paper. Instead, show the writer one instance where the error occurs and how to fix it. Point out another and let the writer fix it. Then tell the student to be on the lookout as the student completes their editing process. This pattern of errors example also shows another strategy for helping students tackle lower order concerns: modeling. Modeling is when you walk a student through how to fix an error by demonstrating how to fix it. you provide a clear example. Reading the paper out loud can also help students resolve lower order concerns. Many times, writers discover missing words, typos, wordy phrasing, and other issues when they slow down and hear their writing come to life. Finally, one of the best ways to help students is by showing them how to find and use resources. Students need to understand that it's okay to not know everything about writing. You can show students the process of locating the most reliable resources and how to utilize them to find answers. There are essentially two methods of giving feedback, directive and non-directive. Directive feedback works exactly how it sounds. The feedback is very clear or direct in explaining to the student what needs to be done. For example, "You need to rewrite this sentence" is a directive form of feedback. However, with directive feedback, you also need to explain why the change is needed and offer the writer some suggestions for how to complete the task, such as, "You need to rewrite this sentence because it is an incomplete sentence missing a verb. Let's find a verb that will express your idea." Directive feedback often works best when being indirect may seem like you are fishing for the right answer. For example, asking a student, "What do you think needs to happen in this sentence?" may be very frustrating for a student who may just think, "Just tell me." Non-directive feedback, on the other hand, can be beneficial for students for a multitude of reasons. For one, we want students' own voices to be valued in their writing. It's important to remember that the writer is in control of their own paper and should be the one to make the final calls about their writing. Non-directive strategies utilize asking open-ended questions that push students to think out their ideas in ways in which they connect. Open-ended questions help students reflect on a reading and/or give some space to talk about their sources and how they want to use them. By asking the right questions, we help students consider their ideas in ways in which they hadn't considered them before. Some open-ended questions might include, "What did you mean by this?" Or, "How does this connect to that?" As you can see, these questions help begin a conversation about the writing that may lead to revisions. Considering directive and non-directive strategies, how would you approach the following situations? You may even want to consider how you can combine directive and non-directive feedback. Pause here to read each scenario and think about your approach. In the first example, you may need to use a directive approach. If the student does not know what a citation style is, it won't help to ask, "What do you think APA means?" It would be best to directly explain what it is, why it is important, and how to use a guide. In the second example, the student is in need of a good brainstorming session. It will not be up to you to determine what exactly the student should write about, especially considering she has two great ideas. A non-directive strategy would help the student weigh the pros and cons of each potential topic and decide which direction to take. In number 3, it depends. However, you may decide to use a directive approach in discussing with the student their pattern of error. At some point, you will likely have to be direct in sharing that the punctuation was used incorrectly. But you can also utilize some questioning techniques while the student attempts to fix the error. The fourth example also depends. I would potentially ask the student, "Can you show me your thesis?" If the student does not know where one is, you will have to explain and proceed with open-ended questions to help the student craft a working thesis. However, in some cases, it may be okay to simply let the student know that you, as a reader, cannot identify the main point. This would be especially helpful in sessions that are not face-to-face. In number 5, non-directive strategies would work well. This would allow you to talk through the options and different ways to organize the ideas. Remember, if you are working with a student asynchronously online, you can still use non-directive feedback. You can simply type out the same questions to help the students think on their own. In this workshop, we have covered the framework of higher order concerns and lower order concerns. We also focused on two different feedback approaches, directive and non-directive. The final point we wish to emphasize is that no situation will be the same, and your goal, as you support student writers, is to be fluid in your approaches. The student, where they are in the writing process, and the assignment will all contribute to deciding what to prioritize in your feedback and what approach to take. By doing so, you will be able to meet a variety of writers where they are and support their writing goals.